Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus and this is Romesh Shivastu. Please to subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates and conversation with the top-notch CHROs, thought leaders and business heads. Today we are going to discuss the impact of generative AI on jobs. If you look at the media reports, in last 1 month, in January 2024 itself, we have seen around 44,000 people are laid off by the tech giants. And these companies are like Microsoft, like Google, like Amazon, eBay, etc. We will try to explore today that what is going to be the impact of generative AI on the jobs. And we are privileged to have Ms. Namrita Mahindro. She is a Chief Digital Officer and Chief Information Officer at Aditya Birla Chemicals. Welcome, Namrita.
Thank you so much, Ramesh. Thank you for having me on this very interesting topic of discussion.
So, Namrita, how do you see? What is your assessment about the impact of generative AI on the jobs?
So, the way I look at it, Ramesh, I think there are multiple forces at play at this point in time. On the one hand, like you said, that there are a lot of job losses which are happening. So, let's understand that first a little bit. The point over there is that with the advancement of AI growing, what is going to happen is that we're going to have more and more jobs automated. And so, as companies grow, their need for new roles will not get created. As people depart on their own, their positions are not going to be filled with people, but they're going to be filled by AI. And AI will come to do a lot of the work which is happening that is repetitive in nature, which is happening in a fixed format. And so therefore we will see a lot of the change happening over there. There was also a very interesting study that I was reading only last week, which actually gives a contrarian point of view to some extent, saying that despite the huge growth of AI, um, we don't always add up all the other forces at play, and therefore despite this growth, it may be that we will not see as many people losing their jobs to AI, because when you come to the ROI calculation, and I think that is something that we've seen over the last decade, even in the India versus the European world or the US world, wherein from an ROI perspective, sometimes having human beings do the same job can be done at a fraction of the cost. So I think therefore that's the silver lining in some senses in terms of AI taking jobs. That's the first element of it. The second element of it is, I think, something that was said almost a decade back by Ginny Rometty, who was the ex-CEO of IBM. And she had written to the president of the US when Donald Trump had come into power in 2016, saying that we don't need more blue collar workers, we don't need more white collar workers. What we really need is new collar workers. So, what are new collar workers? These are really people who don't necessarily have the degrees or the years of experience with them, but they come with some great skill sets which are required in this new age of emerging technologies like AI, like blockchain, like quantum, etc. There's also a third element actually which comes into play, I think, and that is about reskilling. And that is where, towards the end of last year, I was at a Gartner symposium, and they were doing a projection about, how the market is going to look in the next 3 to 5 years and what are some of the broad trends over there. And they actually talked about the resurgence of silver workers. So people who are above 55, who have retired, come with great domain expertise. They come with large networks. And today, if they were to get themselves reskilled in AI, which is not so tough to think about, they just need to have the right mindset. Then those, silver workers will actually become as valuable, if not more, than actually the millennial generation. So I think if I was to sum it up, there are really three factors at play. Yes, AI will take away those jobs which are the routine, mundane tasks that are being done by human beings. And I think in some senses that's good. It frees us of our time. of doing those kind of tasks. We will see new collar workers who are skill based come into play, and we will see a lot more skilling and reskilling happening across generations, including the silver workers.
So very insightful response. Also here I would like to quote the McKinsey report, and according to this McKinsey report, there could happen three things. First, at the redefining of the existing role, around 60% existing role. What is the redefining actually that we will discuss in a later part? What is the meaning of redefining, how it is going to value add into the jobs? And second, that is the displacement of the existing role, and that would be around 5%. And third, there would be a creation of the new jobs. So creation of new job is not specified in this report, but if we can refer the World Economic Forum report, and according to this, around 150 million new jobs that would be created by 2030. What is your comment on this report?
Completely agree. And I think there are going to be new jobs getting created. However, I think the challenge that we're seeing is that the pace at which the technology is evolving, the speed at which people need to reskill themselves is not any longer over years or months. It's much faster. And therefore, the number of people who get displaced may not be able to reskill themselves quickly enough to take on the new jobs that are getting created. So there is a deficit of people available to take up those new roles. That talent deficit is very, very acute. We face it in our day-to-day lives. As technologists, as we're trying to get the right skills into our own teams, and so that time frame that it's going to take for people to get reskilled, I think that's the gap that we are seeing in terms of saying, but the net is going to be that it's going to be net positive in terms of the number of jobs created versus those which are lost.
Yeah, true. It is going to create more jobs rather than it will displace. And second, the companies, especially the IT and tech companies, they are putting a lot of effort and investment to upskill their existing workforce for the generative AI. Like TCS, they are trying to upskill their 100% workforce for the generative AI. Infosys, Wipro, these all the companies are putting the effort. But again, I would like to emphasize on this redefining part, that how it is the generative AI is going to redefine the job. Redefining means the productivity is going to be up, our efficiency is going to be up, the job is going to be more interesting. What is your assessment about that? What is your assessment? How do you feel that how it is going to redefine the jobs?
When we are looking at redefining the jobs, I think there are a couple of things that will come into play, right? Um, as I said earlier, there is the automation of jobs which will come into play. So there is a World Economic Forum report which came out earlier this year and a couple of weeks back. And as per that, in 2022, while 34% of the jobs were going to be done by machines, by 2027, that number would go up to 43%, right? Now, the second element is that the role of machines in reference to human beings. So, up till now, if I was to take manufacturing as an example, we've had, robots and cobots on our manufacturing floors. Now, what that means is that, they are working in an assembly line or they're working in a plant under the supervision of human beings. With Gen AI, this got disrupted about a year plus back. And what has happened is that they have become partners to human beings. So they're working as teammates, and we are seeing that on the forefront. Let us say with the more creative um, jobs, like let us say, if you have to look at marketing or advertising today, you're saying I'm co-creating the script for an ad that I want to shoot. I am co-creating, actually using AI, the models that I want to use for this ad, or I'm co-creating the creative itself in terms of a beautiful landscape. I don't actually have to visit a city. So given that technology or AI working as a teammate has already happened. Now the third category in this that we are seeing is where AI starts playing the role of the manager to human beings. And where we talk about autonomous, factories, or where we talk about autonomous, businesses where decisions will be taken by AI because of the data that they can crunch, because of the various factors that they can take into play beyond the comprehension of human being, just in terms of the compute power. Human beings cannot compute at the same level, at the same scale as a machine. So given that, we will have that third role emerge. So when you're talking about what is this new world of work that is going to come into play, I think from a machine point of view, the machine's role or the AI role is going to transform significantly, in terms of from playing one role, they're now going to play three different roles. If you look at it from a human being's perspective, the change that we're going to see in this space, Ramesh, is really around the fact that human beings are going to take jobs which are more right brained, while we already started seeing AI do a lot of that. But wherever there is high degree of cognition, high degree of complexity, I think those are the areas where humans will still reign. Wherever there is very complex decision making, keeping factors beyond just data in perspective, that is where human beings would come into play. So let me give one or two examples. If I was to take a very simple example, something I had heard, one of the Oxford professors once quote. He said that if my child's nappy has to be changed today, between robotics and AI, I still don't have a robo who can do that. 10 years down the lane, that story may be different. But as of right now, there isn't, that dexterity or that ability between the robotics and between AI to be able to understand how that would happen. If I was to take something, from a perspective of looking at saying, how does this change? Where you have to take into factor things like reputation. What will be the impact on my employees, from an emotional point of view, from their mental wellness point of view? I think AI is not feeling right now, so they are not able to take those decisions which are more holistic, where you have to take into account the overall well-being, let's say, of stakeholders. And that's just another example of where you will have human beings take on more complex decisions which are multidimensional, rather than just based on the data that they need to compute.
I think very beautifully you have explained this term redefining of the jobs here. Uh, if you look at the numbers of layoff, whatever we discussed around 40,000, 44,000, but these numbers are not from India as of now. These are the numbers are from out of India. Can we see also some layoffs in India as well in coming quarters? What is your assessment about this? Wipro has announced some layoff in this the third quarter of this financial year 2024, but these layoffs are not because of the displacement of the jobs by the generative AI. These are because of some cost margin. How do you see the coming quarters in India?
I think you're right, Ramesh, that this is something which had started last year, and that trend is not going to ease off at the moment. I think if you're talking about a quarter, I think that is going to continue. Organization after organization, particularly in the technology sector, are seeing where they can find replacements, for human beings with technology, particularly AI, to do the job. Now, given that context, as I said, so where does the gap come in? The gap comes in terms of, if there are people who are equipped with AI, they are in demand, because these same organizations, while they're laying off these people who don't have AI skills, are heavily recruiting people who are equipped with AI. So the endeavor really is that, yes, there are jobs being displaced, but to my mind, I don't like to use the word displaced. I like to say the jobs are being transformed, and it is up to us as individuals, as professionals, to make sure that we are equipping ourselves to actually be ready for that transformation. So that transformation is here, the transformation is now, and it's really dependent on us to look at how quickly can we transform ourselves in terms of our skill set, to be again relevant to the market.
Yeah, yeah. I was also going through a report by the ILO, International Labour Organization, and according to this report, there are certain number of jobs which are done by the women employees for the female employees, and they're putting the term like clerical jobs, and these jobs can be also impacted, can be displaced by the generative AI. What is your assessment about this?
Ramesh, I think when we start looking at AI and its impact on gender, particularly women, I think the fears are not unfounded. Uh, AI does present disproportionate risks to women, whether these are economic, whether it's security, whether it is looking at, personal reputation. If we just look at what has happened with Taylor Swift and the deep fakes that were circling around in the last couple of days. And I think if it can happen to her, it can happen to anybody. So that risk of AI is larger. If we look at it from an industry point of view, there are certain industries which typically lend themselves better to a women workforce. So again over there, if we look at it, there are um, the jobs for automation are lower down in the in the hierarchy of jobs. Now when we look at that, you would typically find that we have been working with women at the bottom of the pyramid, we've been working with women in the middle management, and after that they often disappear from the workforce. So we anyway have, if the bottom of the pyramid is what is going to get automated, so therefore from an economic point of view, again the women are at a much larger risk. I was looking at some reports recently, and there was a report by the Institute for Women's Policy Research, which actually said that the risk of automation for men is 19%, but for women, it's 29%. So that's almost 33% higher than males. And if I look at that, that's the kind of risk that we are talking about. So what is required at this point in time is really not just equality, because right now we need equity to make sure that we are raising the women up to a standard where there's a level playing field, and then we will talk about equality. But I think the risk that AI is presenting right now, uh, because of the various factors as I mentioned, is making it far more hazardous for women to continue in the workforce.
Namrata, I think now let's move to another part of our discussion. If you remember in 2023, many companies have banned the use of ChatGPT, especially at the workplace. And these companies are like Samsung, like Amazon, and there are a number of companies. And reason I think that is the data leakage. This is the only threat they were having. But right now, it is not easy to evade from using the ChatGPT or generative AI because that is in everyone's pocket right now. How do you see how to prepare ourselves for this?
So I think that's a very pertinent point that you brought up, and I think the point is that when Gen AI came into play in November, end of November of 22. It was just a matter of 2 months before it hit the mark of reaching a million people, right? Now, given that context where it reaches millions of people just in a span of 2 months, I think the risk over there was that organizations were not prepared for that kind of disruption. They were not prepared for that kind of change. So I think one of the first things that one has to do, if we have already not done it in the last year, is to make sure that the organization has a policy. Because if people are using a technology in their personal space and you don't have a policy, they will then assume that they can also use it in their professional space. So, creating that awareness, creating a policy around it becomes extremely important. Nobody is stopping you from using AI or generative AI, but when you're using generative AI, particularly ChatGPT, which became extremely popular and still is very popular, and I use it myself, the idea is what kind of inputs am I giving it? Because if I'm starting to upload confidential data of the organization, then that's a risk. that can have many different kinds of risks, just in terms of the economic exposure, in terms of reputational risk, in terms of many other factors that come to play. So, given that, I think the awareness is the first aspect, the policy is the second aspect. From there, I think it's also about enabling and empowering through various trainings that you do in terms of how to use these technologies, um, so that people are mindful. They're keeping in mind the various downsides of the technology and not just getting carried away with the upside of the technology. And then I think finally it is about having a certain level of regulation. Now, just as we have regulation in terms of governments looking at regulating the usage of these policies, enterprises also need to have some kind of regulations around how these technologies are being utilized within the context of their given organization. And I think the last piece is governance, and governance is an ongoing journey where you need to make sure that you are keeping those checks and balances, where you are doing those audits, and where you are making sure that that governance loop at multiple levels through the journey of using AI is and generative AI particularly is being maintained very stringently. So that's, to my mind, the journey that every organization has to take to be cognizant. Now with DPDP Act, I think that helps because there is a little bit more um, you know um, clarity in terms of the privacy angle as far as the data is concerned. But privacy addresses only one aspect of the ethical risks that we're talking about. There are many other ethical risks which come into play, whether it is around bias, whether it is around the kind of data that you're uploading and how you're using it, whether it's around the transparency. Most of the LLMs that we have today are black boxes. So therefore, then when you don't know what has gone into the training, even as an enterprise, unless you're sure that it is only your data which is going in, and but if you're using an LLM, typically you will have a combination of your data and data which is publicly available. Then that creates certain challenges, and then the accountability. If something was to go wrong, at the end of the day, even in the cases of the brands that you were talking about who barred the usage of ChatGPT or other LLMs, eventually the responsibility lay and the accountability lay with human beings. It is not that the technology is getting um, impacted apart from being barred, but the direct impact, eventually the responsibility is still with human beings. So I think that needs to be taken care of. And last but not the least, I think sustainability and security are such important angles, because what are we opening ourselves up to when we are using these LLMs? I think, again, it needs to be the governance angle that I talked about addresses a lot of these concerns, a lot of these risks, whether they're ethical or whether they're practical, when you're looking at making technologies like AI and generative AI a part of your, DNA or the fabric of your organization, of your customer experiences, of what you do on your shop floor.
Yeah, absolutely. The companies are not trying to avoid the use of ChatGPT. They're trying to create the similar kind of the platform, similar kind of the softwares, and they're using at the workplace. We tried to discuss, I think, all the aspects related to the impact of the generative AI on the jobs. Anything more which is important and we did not touch here, would like to share?
I think the only other thought which sort of comes to my mind is the role of education. Because as we talk about new careers, new industries which come into play, as we talk about the reskilling and the upskilling, I think there is a huge role for educational institutes to play in terms of making sure that people are actually then getting reskilled, and the youth and the generation of tomorrow, while they're digital natives, are being cognizant of the holistic perspectives of these technologies rather than just one particular angle. But I think that's where I would say that a lot more focus needs to happen, um, in terms of looking at seeing how you can progress with these technologies, but with a human-centered approach.
So I think we have been able to justify the topic, and thank you so much, Namrita, for your consideration and sharing your wonderful thoughts and being the part of SightsIn Plus. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramesh. It was a pleasure being here.